So, if you're watching this video, then that means by the end of this video, you want to be seeing something similar to this. Empty engine bay, engine on a motor stand, and I intend to show you the process. So by the end of this video, you will know how to remove a motor from a 1996 to 1998 Mustang GT. And I went through the bottom end, so we'll be dropping the motor, not pulling the motor, okay? My name is Moses. Some call me Demo. I do my own stuff. Let's get right to it. What I just disconnected was the airbox, right? We have this connector here, which is just a push tab connector that plugs into the MAF sensor, the mass airflow sensor. Then you have this sensor here as well, and I actually broke the clip, but it's a push tab clip so that you just plug in there. So those are disconnected, and then this ring attaches this hose here to the actual airbox. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and pull that off now. Now, to remove the airbox, you will also need your Phillips head screwdriver to undo the screws securing the intake hose to the throttle body. And then you have to separate those two vacuum lines from the actual intake hose. Then I moved on to managing things at the back of the car. That's the end of the wire harness that plugs into the main wire harness plug-in on the passenger side, right behind the shock housing. So I'll explain more of that here in a second. So for this portion of the video, I'm going to let you guys mostly see my hands, and that's because it's supposed to be showing how to do this. So the connections I just disconnected in the last portion of the video is this connection here. Drop out a little better. So we have these. This goes here, right? There's a plastic bracket that mounts this to this sidewall here on the back of the shock housing, right? And then this one plugs in right there. Best way to disconnect it from itself is to pull these first. So separate them from the car first. And then you see these, it's a push tab, right? So you'll disconnect like that, all right? Just disconnect from here. So I just simply use my screwdriver, push on that tab at the top. Let's change the angle again. So disconnects here, you push that tab in and pull separate, and then there you go, that's free. You have these two plastic tabs on the portions of the wiring harness that follow along the firewall. So you'll pull those, and there you go, it's separated from the back of the engine. Just put it right over the top of the motor there. Now, you'll have these vacuum lines here to disconnect as well. You have to do this fuel line here, both of those, which I still need to depressurize my fuel rail because I did run it to put it up here, so there's still probably some fuel up there. We'll be disconnecting these heater core hoses. We will bleed the AC essentially without dying, and then that will also be disconnected. Just the lines at least. At this part, we'll be disconnecting the lines down here that compress, because you don't have to take the compressor off. The AC compressor can stay on. You just disconnect all the lines that go to it so that it's not connected to anything when we try to run this motor. Alright, so let me go ahead and continue to do that, and now that I've explained what I'm about to be doing, I'm going to set the tripod up and just kind of get to it. So at this point, I take off the last little bit of vacuum lines from the throttle body, and then ensuring that everything from the intake system is out of the way, I move on to removing the heater core lines. And at this point, if you haven't drained any coolant, then you were just reminded to do so. And that's what I'm going to do here in a second, because you need to drain the coolant before you take those heater core hoses off at the back of the engine. Under the car, on the passenger side, at the bottom of the radiator, you'll locate the drain plug for the radiator. And there you will loosen that drain plug screw, like so. And watch that awesome green fluid flow out. And then you want to also loosen the cap at the reservoir, if not take it all the way off, just to make sure that the reservoir starts to drain out coolant into the hose. And then lastly, you'll go back and actually undo that upper radiator hose too, just because it'll help with draining the rest of the coolant out of the radiator itself once the reservoir is done. So while that was draining, I moved on to disconnecting the cruise control cable and the throttle cable, throttle cable. And then there I go, transitioning to remove that upper radiator hose. You'll need a Phillips head screwdriver to undo that screw clamp if you have aftermarket hose clamps. Otherwise, it could be the old school grip clamp, which you'll use some vice grips to get. But let's see, what else am I doing here? Yep, that's good and draining. Now we're gonna go ahead and remove that reservoir. Everything's already cleared out of there, so once again with that Phillips head screwdriver, I'm doing those hose clamps, removing those hoses, and then I believe it was 3 bolts holding the reservoir. I think they're all 10 millimeters, or they're 8 millimeters. But yeah, you remove those hoses, and then I just tucked it into the reservoir itself, keeping that clamp on the end, and there it is. So you'll also have to remove that last hose at the bottom, connecting to the reservoir to the bottom of the motor. It actually runs to the oil filter adapter there on the driver's side of the car. Once again, another Phillips head screw clamp, and then reservoir's out. Now, looking at the front of the engine, there's a few more things that I have to take off up front. Of course, I'll be taking off that radiator fan, but then there's the wire harness connections over there on the right-hand side. And that power steering line at the bottom, I forgot to disconnect that power steering line. You do want to disconnect that power steering line, because I ended up having to cut it at the end, and now I had to buy a new power steering line. So disconnect the power steering line. It's the high pressure hose. But moving on to removing the engine coils, disconnect the connectors. Mine were saturated in oil because I have a pretty bad timing chain gasket leak, so I had to take those gloves off and kind of clean down the area, and it was just a real serious struggle on doing those connections, as you can see. Me fighting with those connections with the gloves on. So, but yeah, there's 2 connectors that you have to disconnect from the ignition coil packs on both sides, and then there's 4 bolts on each pack, and the bolts are 8 millimeters. So I'll get my electronic ratchet and take those bolts off in a second. I also want you to note that on my spark plug wires, you can see there's white tape. On each of those little strips of tape, there's a number. I numbered the plug wires per the firing order. So that way, when I do take these coil packs off here in a second, and I unplug those plugs, I'll know exactly what order they actually go into. So that's a little tidbit of advice. Mark your plugs in the firing order, so that way you don't have to worry about that when you put it back in, and then pull them right off just like that. Yes, I have the I'm looking for something face. Because although I'm really good about trying to keep track of my tools, that doesn't mean I'm actually good at keeping track of my tools. I have set down these needle nose pliers, and I don't remember where I set them down. My brain is playing tricks on me. So it's only the few places they could be. Wow. I really lost those. I have not gone inside that. There they are. See? That's why they're over there. So, funny thing just now, I was looking for these because I was going to disconnect the throttle cable. It's right here. And then I put it down because I had to go do something, and then I put them right there, but of course I didn't remember that I put them right there, so I just spent like another 2 minutes or so looking for them, and then I came back and was like, that's where they are, because that's where I put them. Anyways. So now that I've secured those needle nose pliers that I lost, I proceed to take off the throttle and cruise control cables. They only go on and come off one way, and it's all about positioning. So for the throttle cable, I did have to move the throttle adjustment lever, I guess you'd call it, forward, and then it allowed me to move the wire out of the groove. And then I move on to removing those heater core hoses at the back now that all the radiator fluid's been drained out and stuff. So you'll use some vice grips or some type of big mouth pliers to grab those old school Y clamps, and I don't know what they're actually called, but I call them Y clamps because why in the hell do we use them? That's neither here nor there. But you get those clamps off, you get those hoses disconnected, and then you use a screwdriver or whatever you have. I use a really long flathead screwdriver, and That's what I use to go ahead and work things off the back of the body. So reaching some of those body pins and stuff like that. So yeah, heater core hoses come off. Wire harness is disconnected from the back of the firewall. Throw it over the engine. Those throttle cables and stuff are out of the way. And that's basically all you need to do for disconnection stuff on the passenger side of the vehicle. And shortly I'll move on to the driver's side. But I advise working from passenger side on over to the driver's side when it comes to getting this motor out of the car. Pinched around the edge so it kind of unstick, and then I just twisted and it actually did exactly what it was supposed to do. Okay, right. So those are disconnected now. Good. Moving on. I need to depressurize the fuel now. This one stays chopped off. This one stays. Let me take a picture of it. Anytime you're disconnecting something for the first time or something like that, or maybe the second time or however many times you're disconnected, if you want to be certain how to reconnect it, take a picture. It's a great way to remember. Take a picture of how it's routed, a few different angles. That way, when you look at it at a different orientation, you know where it goes and how it goes. Now, progress. I've got the battery out, the reservoir out, air intake, the wire and spark plug wires and coil packs. This side of the wiring harness detached from the back of the car, the throttle body wires. Got all those off detached. So now I'm gonna work my way from this side to that side of the car. Get the rest of the wiring harness detached. And then get to the bottom of the car and start to taking off the part, start to take off the stuff I need to take off from the bottom. But up here, I need to do these two fuel lines, which I didn't really go through the whole process of depressurizing the system, which you definitely should. So I'm expecting there to be some fuel coming out of there when I go ahead and do these. Which we'll get to that when we get to that. But then I also had to do the AC lines at the bottom near the compressor so that they won't be attached to the car. And then that should be all the stuff I need to detach from up here. So yeah. Boom. So I'm back. I got my specialty tool and I'm here at these two fuel lines. The specialty tool I'm talking about is this line quick disconnect tool. I have two sets. I have two types. Some people swear by these metal ones, some people swear by these plastic ones, and then there's another type that's the smaller plastic ones. I have both sets because when I was working on this car and messing with the truck, I needed both sets for various things. So yeah. Now the way you use it, you get it over the line. There's this little ring inside that lines up, and then you want to push the line against the tool, and then you want to pull the tool up against it, and then it should release the line. Now I'm expecting a good amount of fuel to come out because I didn't necessarily depressurize anything, so I wouldn't be surprised if we got a nice gasoline mess here in a second. But yeah, you do it, and you should hear a pop or some type of little click, which means you got it. And then you just kind of wiggle it and wiggle it. I think I got it. Yeah. So this line is separated. All right. Not too much gas coming out of there, but yeah, there was a little bit of fuel. What you can do, which I probably will do, I keep zip ties handy because zip ties help to pull things out of the way, keep them out of the way while you're working still. So I'll probably end up zip tying these two lines together and up against here and like maybe to this little housing or something so they stand up and out of the way. But in the meantime, let me disconnect this other one. All right, guys, I'm under the car. My homies are here, so I've been kind of explaining the process, but I have to explain it to you guys too, and then you have to get back to doing it. I'm gonna do the drive shaft. There's 4 bolts. And then I have to unbolt the exhaust. Where's the rest of the bolts at? It's a full exhaust dome, so it has like this hanger system going on. So I'm assuming there's those 2 bolts at the top at the exhaust part, and then I don't know if I gotta cut these or not. I'll figure that out in a little bit. But I think I just unbolt and then pull it down and then like shift forward, and then they'll all slide out of their spots. So it should be I'm just rolling up under the car. This is why I have it elevated. Should be those 2 bolts on the back side. I wonder if y'all can see that. So of course I'm not gonna have the camera down here with me when I do this because it's kind of hard. But let's see. There we go. So there's 2 bolts that are at the end of the exhaust pipe to the header on this end. And then same here. Those 2 bolts. Bolt here, and then a bolt on the back end of the header. 2 bolts, and then I gotta do this sensor here, and then the O2 sensors, and then the exhaust should be done. So I do drive shaft, exhaust, and then I'll go back up there. I'm sure y'all can see most of my face, but yeah. So 2 bolts on the exhaust, I'll shift it forward, and hopefully I think it pulls out the sliders. I think that's how it works when it's a full welded exhaust system. And then the O2 sensors, and then the drive shaft, and K-member. And I'll be dropping the motor. I already did all the rest of the stuff on top, so I'll get back to y'all in a second. Now, sit you down real quick. Well, we're up under the car. There's a few different things that's going on up there. So I have to disconnect some lines for the O2 sensors, and then mine are like O2 sensor. I don't even know exactly what these are. I mean, I think they are the O2 sensors or not. Either way, this side of the exhaust, and then this plugs in right there. I have to disconnect all of those. There's like 3 of them. 1, 2, and then 3 over there, and then there's a 4th one. But then there's these exhaust bolts, right? So this is where I'm stuck at. You see those 2 exhaust bolts, that one and this one here. I got that one off earlier, but that one is a pain in the butt. And it's been kind of giving me some issues. And then there's 2 more exhaust bolts over here. Let's see if we can angle the camera so I have my highlight them. You see them there? If you follow the exhaust at the top, you see that top one, top left, and then let me go around. There's this one on the back side, right above the starter, right? So 4 bolts essentially, and then the exhaust will come off. At least I think that's how it works, because I have these hangers here where the exhaust hangs into it, because it assumes this is a full welded system. So there's those 4 bolts. Then I'll get them out. But those 4 bolts are probably the strongest bolts I've had to deal with ever. And then on this particular side, there's actually an O2 sensor that goes in that little hole up there. Oh, let me fix the camera real quick so y'all can see what I'm talking about. There's an O2 sensor that goes up in this little hole. That hole right there at the end of my finger. Well, let's close these legs. Anyways, yeah, you see that opener right there? There's a sensor that goes in there as well. I had to get that sensor out just so I can get access to that bolt there. And then I've sprayed them. Well, I'm about to spray them with some more blaster though, because they are still pretty much in there, which is why I'm going to cover it. So now I'm about to grab this blaster and spray those bolts, and then hopefully when I come back up under here tomorrow, if not Monday, I'll be able to turn them things off. Well, I'm not gonna lie, one thing that does kind of suck, I'm kind of wide-bodied. Being up under this car as wide-bodied as I am, it'd be a pain sometimes. Do you see how much oil is down here? This is what I was cautioning about, like making sure I sprayed everything off because look at that, it's dripping with oil. There's oil over here, oil dripping off the transfer case there. Yeah, it was an oil pan gasket leak. It was the coater for my main oil leak, and then the oil, all of that oil, and then the timing chain gasket came out too. So bunch of oil just everywhere. So I sprayed it. I sprayed my best. I'm gonna come up under here and with the flames and see what's up. So I'm gonna torch that one, and I'm gonna torch these three, or these two. So 3 bolts total, and hopefully we get some bolts off here. I'm back out here with the camera to update you guys on what I've done so far. I got the AC hoses that attach to the engine, detached from the engine. There would be those 2 holes down there. You'll notice it's that line there, and then that line to the right. And then those are the 2 hoses that attach. They also use this style tool to detach them. Fuel line or AC line, quick disconnect tools. So to do that, I first undid the bracket here, this bracket. It's 2 bolts, the 13 mils, one that goes on this screw here, and then another one that's a little further in, down here. You see it? That's the angle's terrible. There we go, let it focus. It's that stud right there next to my finger. So 2 13mm bolts. This one right here, this one right there. To secure that bracket. Once you get the bracket moved out the way to give you the space you need to put your hand in there and get those 2 hoses disconnected. So at this point, almost everything is detached from up top, motor-wise, including on this side. I made a really good mess getting this power steering fluid reservoir drained. I was draining it into a cup, and then the cup failed, and I had to grab another cup to catch the rest. But yeah, that happened. And so on this side, the wire harness has been disconnected. Last thing I need to do is figure out if I'm going to be just disconnecting the driving or the steering column shaft right there at the joint, or if I'm gonna see if there's a way to disconnect from the rack and pinion, because I don't want to pull it out. And then I got all the exhaust ones except for one detached, and it's a pain. So let's get some of start by removing that other. So, took a bolt out right there, and then there's a bolt right up here that I think needs to come out, and I'm starting to separate that cord right there, which is probably another 10 mil. So, stay right here, and unfold. And it's covered in oil, so I want y'all to see how much oil is like right here. Let's go ahead and get a look at here. Now, I don't know if you know this, but you ain't supposed to have oil right there. No, you're not. No, you're not. You ain't supposed to have oil right there, or anywhere over here. Yeah. Lord have mercy. It's wet. Anyway, so that's why we're pulling this cord, guys. Pull everything. But put you back down real quick. See if this is gonna work the way I think it's gonna work. So, the situation. Those exhaust bolts are indeed a pain in my behind. And because of that, I am going through the process of lifting the motor and separating the K-member a bit by loosening those bolts, right? To create space between the K-member and the exhaust manifold and bolts so I can actually access the bolts and get them off. I I recommend having PB Blaster on hand, a torch or two, and some breaker bars and extensions because the exhaust bolts will be a bit of a pain, for sure. That's the one that was actually the hardest part of this whole motor extraction process. Those exhaust bolts. So. All right, so now the hoist is attached to that chain, which is holding the motor. The motor is supported, so when I do go down to this side to separate the K member to do that exhaust bolt thing I was talking about earlier, it won't all come down at the same time, which will actually allow me to make the space I need to make to get the bolts separated. And then I will separate all the bolts of the K member and lower the whole motor down. Boom. All right, guys, so I've gathered some tools together, and now I'm back up under here to do this steering column separation, right? So, first, I'm going to clean the area. Well, I'll tell you the tools I have. I'm using my Hypertef electric ratchet. Got an extension here, an adaptation piece to go from 3/8 to quarter, and then my 1/4 inch socket, which is a 13 millimeter for that 13 mil bolt that I believe it is. Let me double check. And it is. Awesome. So, now what I'm going to do, before I get to taking bolts off and stuff, I'm going to spray with some brake parts cleaner. Just a nice little amount. Right. Little amount there. Be sure to have your, be in a ventilated area when using stuff like that, because it's a strong smell. Whew. But yeah, the reason I did that is because I'm about to mark this area, right? So, spray with the brake parts cleaner, wipe it off with a nice towel. Yep. Make sure it's all good and clean. And then most people say paint marker, etc. Blah blah blah. Permanent marker. As long as it's permanent, paint, whatever it is, visible, you're gonna mark that shaft, right? I think y'all can see that. So, this is the shaft I'm talking about, by the way. Let's see if we can get the focus a little bit. Focus in. This is the struggle of manning your own camera. So, yeah, right here, just right there with brake parts cleaner. I'm gonna mark it here, from here to here, with my Sharpie before I remove this bolt, because I'm gonna be reusing the same rack and pinion and steering column when I come back to this. So I want it to match up, right? So. Recording. Now, as I set this camera up and make sure y'all are in good focus, I'm gonna talk about what's about to happen. Now, the plan. I bought new sockets, new extensions, breaker bars. I've jacked up the engine, I've lowered the K member. Now I'm about to put this torch on this bolt again and see if I can get this bolt to break one last good time before I grind it off. I almost cursed. So, let's go through the process. Note, the starter has been removed too. I had to watch a video that bring it out this way. So, I'm assuming that y'all can see me because I don't feel like turning the camera around to make sure. But, I'm letting the air kind of get a little more fresh down there. And then, we're going to try to do this. Now, should this torch application not work, I do have a friend that I picked up today, or that was loaned to me today. He's going to help me out should the bolt not want to move. If the bolt don't want to move, we're going to get rid of the bolt. Basically, me and this thing right here are going to get rid of it. Honestly, when you're playing with torches or anything with fire, you should probably also keep a fire extinguisher on hand, but I don't have those. So, Matt, there's a water bottle on the table. Should I catch on fire? Okay, bro? All right. Let's hope we don't catch up in flames. Nope. Yeah, you just kind of go until your ancestors tell you to stop, or until it's like visibly red. But I don't really go for the visibly red part as much as I just go until the ancestors tell me to stop. Then you put it out, put the torch out of the workspace. It did work. The torch worked, so that's me loosening that bolt. It came off.
But I doubt that's going to be anywhere near enough for what you're going out the bottom.
Learned recently that this bolt is also something that I should probably take off. It is a ground wire from the frame to the motor. So looks like a 10 mil. It is a 10 mil. I'm gonna try to break it loose. I think this is my last 1/4 inch. That the right way? It moved. You know my rule. If you got it, use it. Power tool. Alright, so at this point, I'm gonna start lowering on the motor. Make sure it doesn't hit anything on the way down, and then I'm gonna go and try to lower the transmission and see if we're all good. So as you see, I'm walking around the car and lowering it inch by inch, just kind of making sure everything clears as I lower the motor, because you don't want to get hung up on stuff. And as you can see, it is going down. I'm making sure that the K-member bolts are separated and the K-member actually separates from the car itself. And then I'm also making sure nothing's caught up at the transmission. And we're going around. Everything's good on the engine portion. Now I'm going to go up to the back. All right, and so we're going to get the transmission supported. Off and moved out of the way. Now, we're going to see about lowering this transmission down. Guys, I think I just successfully dropped the damn motor. So, in the previous clip, you saw me lower the motor and transmission. At that time, the wheels were still in the car, and I tried to lift the car off the motor, but the wheels had the engine sitting up too high, so I had to readjust, and this is my readjustment. So, advisably, you will have to remove all the suspension parts, at least down to the spindles, taking the brake rotor and calipers off, and if you have a tie rod end separator or whatever, you'll be able to actually separate those tie rod ends and stuff and get the spindle off, but I didn't at the time, so I left the spindles on. There's this little dust cover thing that's on the back of it. It got bent and folded in half and broke, but it's okay. And I did the same thing on the opposite side, so removed the rotor and caliper. This one you'll probably be able to see the better angle. There are 2 bolts on the back of the caliper. I believe they were 13s or 12s or something like that, and then once you remove the caliper bolts, everything really just slides off. So you remove those 2 bolts, pop the caliper off, pop the rotor off, just like that, and cool. I put it back down, and now we're gonna go ahead and get this engine or furniture dolly prepped up and ready to put it on the transmission. Advisably, I would tell you to go get a little piece of wood to put in between, because there's that hole in the middle of the furniture dolly, which the transmission will fall through. So put a little piece of wood, secure it with some self-tapping screws. I use 3. Boom. You got a furniture dolly that'll hold a transmission. So now I'm going to go ahead and lift the motor back up using the alternator bolts again and the chain and the engine hoist. And I'm doing this just so I can readjust that furniture dolly that's up front under the engine to be horizontally placed under the K-member. And then that other furniture dolly that you saw me at, the piece of wood, I'm going to put behind the engine up under the transmission, basically making a T shape so that I can roll the motor out. Whoa. That's something scary to realize. While you're under the car. Yeah, what I'm talking about. It's kind of scary. So the other day, it got really sketchy in the garage. I don't know. You can see how the car is supported on the edge of that jack stand, but that's not considered safe. So we're gonna do our best to get this situated here in a little bit. Living on the edge, man.
So I did stop the camera and start doing more stuff again. But this is how the car is sitting now. I'm using the front bumper support instead of using the radiator support this time. Gives me like another 6 inches of extra clearance without having to lift it as high. And then, as you can see, I got the furniture dollies up under it. I just gave it a push. So I'm hoping at this point, there's enough clearance that I can push this mug out this way. Ha! Ha ha! That's a moved motor. And that's it. You do that. I pulled the motor. Yeah, I did. That is an actual thing.